Has this ever happened to you? You're in a conversation in English, someone asks for your opinion, and you have a clear thought in your head, but what comes out of your mouth is, I think it's okay, maybe? I don't know.
Every single time in my first year abroad.
Right? The opinion was there, the feeling was strong, but the English to express it just vanished.
Like your brain locked the door and swallowed the key.
Exactly that. And the worst part is when someone then says, "Oh, you don't have a strong opinion on this?" And you do. You have a very strong opinion. You just couldn't get it out.
That moment of being misread, that's painful. Because your thoughts are intelligent, your ideas are interesting, but the language barrier made you seem uncertain or uninterested.
And that is exactly what today is about. Because having an opinion is not the problem. Expressing it naturally in English, that is the skill. And it is a skill anyone can learn.
Including you? Starting right now. Hey English learners, welcome back to the English Leap podcast, your cozy space to learn real English through real conversations. I'm Lily.
And I'm Alex. And if that cold open felt familiar, if you have ever had a strong opinion hiding behind weak words, this episode is made exactly for you.
Today we are talking about how to give your opinion confidently in English. Not just the phrases, but the whole picture. How native speakers actually share what they think, how they agree and disagree naturally, and how to sound like yourself, your real, intelligent self, even in a second language.
By the end of this episode, you will know how to introduce your opinion naturally without sounding robotic or rehearsed, how to agree and disagree without being rude or too soft, how to hold your ground when someone pushes back, and how to sound like someone worth listening to in any conversation, in any room.
This is a B2 to early C1 level episode, so the language will be rich and natural, but we will explain everything clearly as we go.
And later, we have two special sections, a full opinion phrase toolkit with over 20 real sentences you can use immediately, and our word tour, where we break down the most powerful vocabulary from today.
So get comfortable. Maybe you have a strong opinion about something right now.
About anything. The weather, your neighbor's dog, the state of the world.
Hold on to that, because today you are going to learn exactly how to say it.
Let's start with the phrase every English learner uses for opinions. I think.
The classic.
And there is nothing wrong with I think. It is correct. It is useful. But when it is the only tool you have, it starts to work against you.
Because in English, I think on its own, especially with a falling voice, can sound hesitant, like you are not sure, like you are apologizing for having an opinion.
Which is the opposite of what you want.
Exactly. Imagine two people answering the same question. What do you think about working from home? Person A says, I think it's quite good, maybe. Person B says, personally, I find it much more productive, though I think the social side is something you really have to work at. Same basic opinion, completely different impression.
Person B sounds like someone who has thought about this, who has experience, who is worth listening to.
And the difference is not intelligence, it is language tools. Person B has more ways to express what they think, and that makes all the difference.
So think of opinion phrases as a toolkit. I think is one screwdriver. Useful, but a professional has 10 different tools, and they pick the right one for the right job.
And today we are going to give you that toolkit. 10 tools, real ones, the ones native speakers actually use.
Starting with the first and most powerful upgrade from I think, personally. Personally, one word, massive difference.
When you say personally, you are doing two things at once. You are owning the opinion, this is mine, not a fact, not everyone's view, mine, and you are inviting the other person to have a different view without conflict.
Personally, I prefer working from home. Personally, I think the film was a little overrated. It sounds confident and open at the same time.
Confident and open. That is the sweet spot of giving opinions in English. One thing I notice when I listen to native English speakers is that they use phrases that show the opinion has history, like it came from somewhere.
What do you mean?
Like, in my experience, or from what I've seen. These phrases tell the listener, I am not just guessing. I have lived this. I have observed this. My opinion has roots.
And that makes it more credible immediately.
Exactly. Compare, I think big cities are stressful, versus, In my experience, big cities can be incredibly stimulating, but after a while, the noise and pace start to wear you down. Same general idea, but the second one sounds like a person who has actually lived it.
And native speakers do this constantly. It is almost automatic. From what I've seen, in my view, as far as I can tell, these are not fancy phrases. They're just natural ways of framing an opinion as yours.
And here is something important. These phrases also protect you. When you say, in my experience, you are not claiming to be an expert on everything. You are sharing your perspective. And that is actually more honest and more likable.
I remember the first time I used from what I've seen in a conversation with a native speaker. I had been using I think for everything, and they actually responded differently, more engaged, more curious, like they wanted to hear more.
Because from what I've seen signals there is a story behind it, and humans are wired for stories.
So next time you have an opinion, try adding one of these before it. In my experience, from what I've seen, in my view, as far as I can tell. Pick one that feels natural for you and practice it this week.
Just one. That is all it takes to start sounding more natural.
Now let's talk about agreement, because agreeing in English is not just saying yes or I agree.
It is really not. And when learners only use I agree for everything, it can start to sound flat, like you are filling space rather than actually engaging.
Native speakers agree with energy, with nuance, sometimes with a little surprise.
Exactly. Think about the difference between these three responses to someone saying, I think rest is just as important as hard work. Response 1, I agree. Response 2, absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Response 3, that's such a good point, actually. I used to think pushing through was always the answer, but I've changed my mind completely on that.
Response 3 is a conversation, not just an answer.
And that is what native speakers do. They agree and add. They validate and extend. It makes the other person feel heard, and it keeps the conversation alive.
So what are the phrases? The first here, strong, warm agreement. Absolutely. Exactly. That's so true. Couldn't agree more. That's a really good point. These are immediate, natural. They land well.
The second tier, thoughtful agreement, where you add something. I think you're right, and I'd add that resonates with me because I feel the same way, especially when it comes to...
And then the third tier, the careful agreement, when you mostly agree, but with a small reservation. I think you're largely right, though I'd say that's a fair point. I just add that it depends on...
The third tier is where you start to sound very natural, because native speakers rarely agree with everything 100%. They agree in degrees, and having the language to express those degrees is what makes you sound fluent.
It's also what makes you interesting to talk to. Nobody wants to speak with someone who just nods along to everything.
Real conversations have texture, and agreeing with nuance gives the conversation that texture. Now, the part that makes most English learners nervous.
Disagreeing.
Disagreeing, because in many cultures, disagreeing directly can feel rude or aggressive. And so learners either stay silent, which makes them invisible, or they go too blunt, which creates unnecessary friction.
And in English, especially British English, there is a whole art to disagreeing well. It is indirect enough to be polite, but clear enough that the other person knows where you stand.
The key is what I call the cushion and the point. You put a soft cushion before your disagreement, something that acknowledges the other person, and then you make your point clearly.
So instead of, no, I don't think that's right, which is direct and can feel sharp, you might say, I see where you're coming from, but personally, I'd look at it a little differently.
Or, that's an interesting perspective, though I'm not entirely convinced because... The cushion is, that's an interesting perspective. The point is, I'm not entirely convinced.
The cushion validates. The point communicates. Together, they make disagreement feel like dialogue, not debate.
And there are so many beautiful cushion phrases in English. I take your point, but I understand where you're coming from, though. That's a fair argument. I'd just say that I can see why you'd think that, but in my experience...
Each one of these tells the other person, I heard you. I respected what you said, and here is where I see it differently.
Which is so much more powerful than just disagreeing, because the other person stays open, they feel respected, and the conversation continues.
I want to do a quick role play so our listeners can hear this in action. Lily, say something I can disagree with.
Okay. I think social media has been almost entirely negative for society.
I see where you're coming from, and there are definitely serious problems.
but personally, I think it depends heavily on how you use it. In my experience, it has connected me with people and ideas I never would have found otherwise.
See? He disagreed, but I don't feel attacked. I feel like we are having a real conversation.
That is the goal. Disagreement as connection, not conflict.
Alex, there's one more situation we need to talk about. You have given your opinion, someone pushed back, and now you feel pressure to take it back, even though you still believe it.
This is so common, especially for learners who are not fully confident yet. Someone challenges your view, and suddenly you say, "Oh yes, actually, you're probably right," even when you still disagree inside.
It's like your conviction disappears the moment someone applies pressure.
And it happens to native speakers too, but they have phrases to hold their ground politely, to say, "I heard your pushback, I respect it, and I still think what I think."
What are those phrases?
The simplest and most powerful is, "I take your point, but I still think." It acknowledges them, it is respectful, and "I still think" is a small but powerful signal. It says, this is not a new opinion, this is a considered position.
Or, I understand the counterargument, though I'm not sure it changes my view. That sounds very mature, very measured.
And there is a beautiful phrase for when someone is very forceful and you want to stay calm. "I think we might just see this differently, and that's okay." This closes the loop without surrender and without conflict.
We might just see this differently. I love that. It respects both positions without one person having to lose.
Because the goal of giving an opinion is not to win. It is to communicate your genuine perspective clearly and confidently. And sometimes two people simply see things differently, and that is completely fine.
The people who fit in most naturally with native speakers are not the ones who always agree. They are the ones who are clear, warm, and secure in what they think.
Secure. That is the word. You can be warm and secure at the same time. And that combination is what makes someone genuinely engaging to talk to.
Okay, one final thing before we get to the toolkit. The real secret of fitting in with native speakers when giving opinions.
Tell them.
It is not about having a perfect sentence. It is not about advanced vocabulary. It is about rhythm and authenticity.
Native speakers do not always give perfectly structured opinions. They pause, they use filler words, they say honestly and look and the thing is. They show that they are thinking in real time.
And that is actually something English learners can do too. Phrases like, "the thing is," or "honestly," or "look, the way I see it." These are not mistakes. They're signals that you are a real person having a real conversation.
The thing is one of my favorites. It tells the listener, I am about to give you the real core of what I think. Pay attention.
Honestly signals that what follows is your genuine view, not just a polite answer.
And look at the beginning of a sentence, very natural in spoken English. It signals that you are about to make a point that matters to you. Look, the way I see it, the situation needs a completely different approach.
These are the words that make opinions sound lived in, real, human.
And that is what fitting in with native speakers is really about. Not sounding like a dictionary, sounding like a person who thinks, feels, and has something real to say.
Which you absolutely do.